Hi, my name is Jessica Baptiste, and my functional area is orientation programs. So I interviewed Amanda Villanueva, the Assistant Director of Student Activities at the University of St. Thomas, Houston. She had a lot of helpful and insightful comments for me for this orientation. So let's dive right in. Got this information from the CAS standards, and so the orientation program, the functional area role on campus is to facilitate the transition of new students into the institution. And Amanda was right on board with this. She said their main goal is to indoctrinate students to the campus life and campus culture. It's also to prepare students for the institution's educational opportunities and student responsibilities, to initiate the integration of new students into the intellectual, cultural, and social facets of the institution. Also include parents and guardians and families in support of the new student. And so at St. Thomas, they do include parents in their orientation. She told me about the first week of orientation. Well, actually, it's just a week program there at St. Thomas. And family members are invited, like that first day of kickoff, to come and join in and celebrate with their students and have a meal there on campus. And then they kind of kick them out for the rest of the week so the students can become independent and ingratiate into the culture on campus. So then also another mission is to contribute to institutional enrollment management, including retention, and a reference should be made to student learning and development. She told me there at St. Thomas retention is not a main goal for orientation there at their campus because retention is pretty high and students usually do not leave the program. The differences at different institution types for the orientation programs is pretty vast because it depends on what campus you're at, the size of the institution, is it public, private, or for profit. That determines the scope of the orientation. At St. Thomas, it's a small private Catholic institution, and so they only have a week-long orientation one time during the summer before school. And so, but at Sam Houston, there's a couple of different, several different orientations throughout the summer for a couple of days. And so that's part of it. Also, sometimes the orientation programs are linked to a freshman class. And then also, it depends on institutional needs. Is there a high need on your campus for retention? So then it will be a strong target with your orientation program. Also, what type of campus climate are you trying to, have there? So one of the things Amanda told me was she's trying to increase school spirit at St. Thomas because the students usually don't even know their school colors. They don't wear a lot of spirit shirts, and so that's one of the focuses for her this year for orientation programs. Also, demographics is key for how they look across different campuses because you want to serve the needs of those students you are serving. Historical background for orientation programs. Well, orientation programs have been around just since institutions formed here in this country. And in the 1640s at Harvard, there were tutors there who were expected to counsel and befriend the young freshmen in order to support them in their transition to college. So this is kind of how orientation programs were brought about. And so now they're formalized, now, and it also includes faculty members in that process. The primary groups that are served are pretty much all new students to campus, specifically freshmen and transfer students, but all students are touched by this functional area. Skills and competencies needed. Amanda told me that she does everything in that office because she is at a small private institution, so she's the only person really working there. She's the assistant director, she told me, but there is no director of student activities, and so she is doing programming, event planning. She says she's an educator outside of the classroom. She's a counselor there when the students are there for the orientation program, so she wears many hats. So the list on the right hand side shows the core competencies for an orientation program administrator, including theoretical and institutional knowledge, diversity, inclusion, and access, campus collaboration, curriculum and content development, and so on. So there's many different competencies that you must be an expert in for this domain. Typical roles, I wouldn't even say there's a typical role because I found different roles on different school websites, like assistant director of activities, like Amanda. Then there's also the director of acceptance students and orientation at Sam Houston. And then, there, many different titles for this role. And then I also found that this orientation programs is housed in very different offices on each campus. It could be the Office of Admissions, Student Life, or even Student Services. So it's very different no matter what campus you go to. State and national issues facing orientation programs. This information is specifically coming from Amanda and what she feels were some issues for orientation programs going forward. Specifically, she told me about the recent ban on travel going on in the news now and how that has impacted her campus because they do have a large portion of international students. And then also she's wondering what will happen with the sexual assault policies that, they usually give that information to students in orientation week. And so that's kind of up in the air. Also, there's a push now for financial literacy during orientation. She is kind of concerned about that given the budget constraints on her campus. Then there's also increasing federal mandates. She's thinking that orientations will now become more of a business transaction instead of, a community building time on campus. And then here are some of the CAS standards that I highlighted. So first one is to contribute to student learning and development. Orientation programs must identify relevant and desirable student learning and development outcomes. And then they also must be intentionally designed and guided by theories and knowledge of learning and development. I think this is very key because we are talking about applying theory to practice. And so even with orientation programs, they should be guided by theory. And then orientation programs also should inform the student about the culture of the facility and so they can be fully integrated in that campus life. Orientation programs also should establish goals for diversity, equity, and access. I thought this was very important, especially the mention of understanding of identity, culture, and self-expression and heritage. So we have to be able to meet the students' needs that we serve. And then also, we should be using assessment to inform planning and decision making. The biggest national organization associated with orientation programs is the National Orientation Directors Association, also called NODA, and their website is nodaweb.org. They have tons of information for people who are in this functional area, including conferences coming up. They have publications. So this is the main area and website to check out. Also, ACPA and NASPA are good websites for this functional area. Here are some publications that I found actually on NODA's website. The Journal of College Orientation and Transition is the main one. And then there's also the Orientation Planning Manual. And then a couple of the other ones are geared more towards the student, like empowering parents of first-year college students, navigating the first college year, and a guide for families of commuter students. So these will help with professionals, referring this information to their students. So some of the joys and frustrations that Amanda shared with me, or specifically with the joys that she enjoys creating the campus culture there, and like I told you earlier, one of her main goals this year is to increase school spirit, and so students will know about the background of the school. They are a Basilian institution, and so students are really not very aware of that, and so that's one of her joys in aiding in student development and building retention and building community there. But she says her frustrations are mainly surrounding the budget constraints there. They're going through a tight time with the budget, and so there's not a lot of resources there available, and also not a lot of help for her in her department since she is just the only person running that department. And then the inconsistent messages on campus is not like a cohesive message for the students, and they don't talk about diversity and various things like that. And so that was one of her concerns. And also, just orientation programs are largely unenforced, so students can choose to show up or not. So here are some of my references. I encourage you to go to NOTA and look there. There's a lot of great resources there if you're interested in orientation programs. Also, the CAS standards for this area was very good. And so I thank you for your attention, and good night.